So today we cover Genesis chapter 13 verses 1 through 12, and in it we see a unique situation to where now Abram is coming out of Egypt, having fled there previously in chapter 12 because of the famine that was going on, and now he's coming out of Egypt and we see him coming out with a lot of riches. Him and his nephew Lot are very, very wealthy at this point, but the interesting thing that takes place is we see that Abram comes out and immediately the first thing he does is re-engage with the Lord. We see that he returns back to the altar that he previously built between Bethel and Ai, and he begins to worship the Lord. Later on in the passage, we see that him and Lot begin to beef. They begin to have conflict between their herdsmen, and the land just wasn't able enough to sustain both of them. And so Abram presented Lot with an option that if he would go to the right, then that Lot would go to the left, and vice versa. And we see though that from that, Abram is doing, and God is doing all this with Abram to separate him from many different things so that he could get him to a degree by himself and begin to fulfill the Abrahamic covenant. And so first, God had to call Abram out of Egypt, separated him from the people where he had grown rich and wealthy. And so we talked this morning about how our comforts and where we typically have grown wealthy at can actually inhibit us from actually growing in the Lord and what the Lord has called us to do. The second part is we see that sometimes the Lord uses conflict to separate us. So the conflict between Abram and Lot's herdsmen was a way of creating an environment where Lot had to go somewhere else so that God could deal primarily with Abram. And then the last thing that we see that God uses to separate us from other people is our conviction. So Lot's conviction was he looked upon the Jordan Valley and he saw all of the riches that could be made there. And so he moved honestly according to his flesh rather than according to the Lord, whereas Abram knew what the Lord had called him to do, and so he remained put there in the land of Canaan. And so we see that from all of this, the Lord has called us to separate ourselves, and he'll use various things to help us separate. And so we had a great time talking about that. I pray that as you watch this video and as you read Genesis 13, 1 through 12, that you will begin to ask yourself, what has the Lord called you to do, and how do you need to separate to do that? What conflict is arising in your life, and how has that conflict provoked you to separate from maybe different people, different situations, different circumstances? And also, what conviction do you have that has separated you from this world? What compels you at the end of the day? Be very careful that you don't place your trust in riches or in comfort, but instead you place your trust in the Lord, the God of Abraham. And so I encourage you with that this morning. I pray that you would read that passage. If you have questions or thoughts or concerns, by all means, always feel free to contact us, shoot us an email, like us on Facebook. Until we meet again, I pray that you have a blessed day. God bless you.